you've all had the schedule for this retreat, but I'm just going to just to kind of settle us down. I'm just going to go over it just a little bit. So every morning at 6:30, there's meditation and morning service, which you're welcome to attend. We recommend it, but it's fine if you can't, if it's not, just come to what you can come to. It's really good if you can come to all the talks and discussions. But if you can't make it to all the meditation periods, that's just fine. Just whatever you can manage, it seems good to do. And as we usually recommend, it's nice not to be doing a whole lot of extraneous things during a retreat. If you can stay away from, movies and a lot of news watching and all that kind of thing, just to kind of concentrate and focus actually on what we're doing, and not to read a lot of extraneous stuff. Reading the things we're talking about is helpful, but you don't have to. It's okay. Just whatever works best for you. So at every morning at 11 o'clock, there's a Dharma talk, and Monday through Saturday. It's nice if you can come on time, because it's just nice to be there at the beginning, so you're not coming in late, because if you miss the beginning of something, somehow you're always kind of running behind a little bit. So if you can come at the beginning, that's great. In the afternoons, on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, there'll be Sanzen at 3 o'clock for those who sign up for it. And I think Reverend Chico is emailing you with what date you'd come, and then you sit in meditation, and we'll admit you with a gong, so you'd know it was you, so you wouldn't have to be anxiously looking at the screen to see if it's you or not. So we'll do it that way, and apparently it works quite well. So, one at a time, I admit you, and I ring a gong so you know it's you. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday we have discussions at 3 o'clock, and then evening service after that. So it's nice to be here for that, to be part of that, because it's a way of, we can talk about the text we're talking about, we can talk about what we're discussing at the talks, or just things about training, because actually all the talks relate to practice anyway. It's not like it's something esoteric. And then in the evening we have meditation at 7:15, followed by Vespers, Monday through Friday. And on Saturday night you get a night off. So the retreat ends on Saturday afternoon with the last discussion. And so that's what we're going to do. But you have all this. I just thought I'd go over it briefly so you know. And between these times, that's when you kind of make food, eat, rest, read the script, read the things we're talking about, or read something else that's, focused on our training, or sit, whatever works for you. So, and all the talks will be posted online, so if you do miss a talk, you can always catch it up later. So, because I know there's things happen, you have appointments or other things you have to do. So the talks will all be online, and you can, on our website, and you can find them. And we don't just record the discussions, because they're, people ask questions, and we never record those. We just, whoever's there is there, and if you're not there, you're not there. The Dharma talks, as you know, they'll be based on some of Great Master Dogen's chapters in Zen is Eternal Life, Rev Master Jiyu's work, her first book actually. And although some of these talks are quite hard to understand, because it's Dogen, he's very hard to understand sometimes, but we'll try and figure it out. And actually all of his chapters, all of his talks and all of his writings point to basic training, although some of them seem really hard to understand. He was had deep understanding of the truth, and he was also a poet, and he lived in 13th century Japan, so it's a little different from our culture, to say the least. So it's quite hard to understand them at the best of times. But if you keep coming back to the practice, and that's what I try to do, to keep coming back to how does this relate to how we train ourselves, not just some esoteric thing. I'm not very good with esoteric things, so I think just whatever actually helps us with our training, both in practical ways and the attitudes of mind that are helpful to foster. And, although he can be hard to understand, his teachings, Dogen's teachings, have helped many people over all these centuries. So there's a lot in it for us. If they weren't helpful to people, they wouldn't have endured, and they have endured. People find them really helpful down to this very day. Well, there are a great many translations of Dogen's writings, both translated into modern Japanese and also translated into English. People have written books about them all, lots of books. Each of the chapters we're going to study has at least one whole book in English written about it, I think. And some of them quite hard to understand, almost as hard as Dogen. And I just feel like Reverend Master's translations, Reverend Master G.U.'s translations. I like them because I was raised with them, as it were. They're familiar. When I was a young monk, we'd read them a lot, and she would talk about them in her talks a lot. A lot of the things we read, I think, oh, that's from that chapter. Things you would talk about, things we say, things we quote, are in these chapters. And the chapters all kind of relate to each other, actually. There are themes that go throughout, as you'll see. They're not completely independent. You can see how they kind of hold together. And there's a poetry and a depth in Reverend Master's version that I really like. She tried to keep Great Master Dogen's poetic sense. When she worked on a translation, she would go over it, and each sentence she would go over and over. I saw her do this over and over again until she got it right, until it would kind of just strike a chord in the heart of the person reading it or hearing it. She wouldn't just do something, she would talk about people who translated, and they would take the first word in the dictionary and think that was the one you used, and so they make gobbledygook out of Dogen. But she did not do that. And Koho Zenji also said, don't be too literal. What's he talking about? What's he getting at? And that's what she would try to do, not have always a literal translation, but to try to convey what he was trying to say, what he was trying to get at. And that's what she does. Even so, it can be really hard to understand. But there's that beautiful kind of poetic feeling to it that I really like. And I think a number of us who are raised with it really do too. Well, you can compare translations, and it can be helpful up to a point. Sometimes you can get a sense of what what does this mean? And you can look at somebody else's translation, and it might help to clarify it. But I think one has to be careful, because it's awfully easy to start making comparisons and judgments. So this person's right, that person's not right. They like this one, I don't like that one. Having said, I really like Reverend Master's translation, doesn't mean I don't think other translations are really good, because they're all by people who are really sincere in their practice, trained themselves deeply. Don't worry. And just really sincerely try to do a good job of conveying what Dogen was trying to convey. So they all have their merits, and as I said, you don't have a kind of discriminatory mind too much if you compare translations, to do it with an open heart, because they all try to translate with an open heart. Some of them learn from each other, and sometimes they actually didn't know what Dogen was trying to get at, and they just make their best guess. There's a lot of it. People just think, well, I don't know what he means, but maybe he means this, and just guess at what he was trying to say, but something that's helpful for our practice. That's certainly what Reverend Master tried to do, certainly what Reverend Hubert tried to do in his translation of the Shobogenzo, which is quite different from Reverend Master's in some ways, but it doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong. They're just different aspects of the same thing. Now, there's one thing about Reverend Master Ji-Yu's writings and her teachings and her language. She used language that was familiar in her time, and some of it seems really outdated now. In particular, she would use the male form to indicate both men and women. She would say things like, if a man does such and such, and he does this, that, and so forth. And that was what they did in her time. It included both men and women. She never thought, oh, just men do this. Clearly, she was a woman. And that was normal for her. So we need to bear this in mind and not get put off when she says, if a man does this and a man does that, she says, well, what if you think, well, what about us? Reverend Master Jiyu herself, she she underwent an enormous amount of discrimination because she was a woman. Both when she was young, in England, she had a lot of trouble. She was a church organist, and it was harder for her to find work because she was a woman. And at least one job she had for many years, and then they found a man to do the job, and they gave her the sack because she was a woman. She was not pleased. So she went to Japan. And then in Japan it was hard too, because she was in a male temple, with male Japanese priests, and she was a British woman, so it was hard. So she knew very well what it's like to be dismissed or overlooked because you were a woman, or people thinking you couldn't do it, and so forth. So do not worry when she says when a man does this and that. Her feeling was, she was a great champion of women, and her feeling was, women just have to get on with it. Don't worry about what people think. You just have to do the deed. Just do it. Don't worry about discrimination. Just keep on going. She always said, women have Buddha nature. Women can go all the way in training, as she put it. So there's no sense at all that she was discriminating against women or they thought she couldn't do it. Very clearly, being a woman herself, she knew what it was like, and she really wanted to help women. So don't put off by that. But sometimes people don't know that, And anyone who met Reverend Master Jiyu or lived with her knew that she had this big heart that it included everybody. Everybody was part of that. She didn't push anybody away. So there we go. Well, there's quite a number of chapters in Zenno's Eternal Life of Great Master Dogen's writings, and these are the ones that Reverend Master Jiyu felt were the most important. Some of them are for monks, really. They're monastic regulations and things. We don't keep to all of them. I don't think we could. Some of them are extremely detailed, very Japanese or Chinese. I think what he's writing about is what he learned in China, and he's bringing it to Japan. So he was trying to bring over what he had learned and found it in Japan. And it's interesting because Reverend Master Jiyu is kind of doing the same with us over here. They say it's like planting a lotus on a rock, trying to bring the Dharma to a new country. He felt Japan was a backward country. He's always going on about how backward Japan is and how we're all barbarians and we haven't got any sense of training and all this. But he was doing it anyway. And he said, in fact, there are true trainees to be found who really want to hear the Dharma. And so he wanted to teach them. But he'll talk about that in one of his chapters. So I didn't use any Great Master Dogen's chapters about monastic training, about how to eat in the meditation hall and all that. What I've done is use some of the chapters in the Shobogenzo that there were several chapters, and 3 of these we're going to study. We've got Bendowa, the lecture on training, as Reverend Master translates it. Genjo Koan, the problem of everyday life. And Shoji, life and death. Those are the ones we will study. And yes, and one other teaching that Dogen did have was, the one thing he wrote was the Rules for Meditation, which is not in Zen's Eternal Life, because it's in a lot of other things. That was the first thing he wrote when he came back from China, how to meditate, very clear instructions. And then he wrote Bendowa, why you should do it, and that's what we'll start with tomorrow. So I think all these chapters hang together nicely, and I think we'll have fun. So I hope you'll enjoy the retreat. I hope we all do well with it. I think it'll benefit all of us. And thank you for participating. And we'll see you tomorrow.